Coming up, President Biden has appointed a Native woman as the next U.S. Treasurer. We'll introduce you to the newest member of the ICT Newscast and a history lesson from a Yakama elder. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is honored to be a supporter of Indian Country Today. Working with award-winning professors, Cronkite students learn news reporting, social media, shooting and editing videos, and producing content for communications industries. Cronkite's 15 professional programs give students the opportunity to cover critical issues throughout the U.S. and beyond. Learn more at cronkite.asu.edu.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez.
Amarawa Hopa. Thank you for joining us. We start with the historic day as President Biden appoints a Native woman to become the nation's next treasurer. On Tuesday, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen visited the Rosebud tribal lands in South Dakota. During her visit, she announced Mohegan citizen Lynn Malerba will be the first Native American to serve as treasurer. Malerba will also lead the department's newly established Office of Tribal and Native Affairs.
Treasurer Malerba will expand our unique relationship with tribal nations, continuing our joint efforts to support the development of tribal economies and economic opportunities for tribal citizens. Importantly, we look forward to working with tribal nations and Congress to make this office permanent.
President of the National Congress of American Indians, Vaughn Sharp, called the move truly historic. The treasurer oversees the U.S. Mint, and their signature appears on the nation's currency. And we'll have more on this story later in our newscast. In Canada, the Assembly of First Nations has voted to suspend its first female national chief. Roseanne Archibald was first elected in July 2021. Then last week, the advocacy organization said she had been suspended because of a public statement she made that allegedly attacked the integrity of the body. Archibald will be suspended with pay pending the outcome of an investigation into 4 complaints against her. Archibald responded by defending herself against allegations of bullying and harassment. She said she, quote, welcomed the investigation, calling the move a smear campaign. AFN said the move to suspend her was regrettable, but they had, quote, no other choice. Archibald will remain suspended until the executive committee reviews the findings of the investigation and makes a final decision regarding her status. In Minnesota, a trailblazing Ojibwe City Council member has died. Renee Van Nett was the first Native woman elected to the Duluth City Council. In early June, Van Nett died at 52 after losing a battle with cancer. Her strong commitment to her Ojibwe culture and spiritual ways showed through all aspects of her life. Van Nett had been serving her second term on City Council and even expressed plans to run for state senate. After her passing, the state's Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan declared the day of her funeral Renee Van Nett Day in the state of Minnesota. The Northeast tribes that make up the Wabanaki Confederacy are one of the first in North America to greet the sun, so it fits that a Wabanaki prayer will help open a comprehensive celebration of Indigenous culture in Washington, D.C. this month. Stuart Huntington has more.
Welcome, everyone. Together.
Dwayne Toma is dedicated to preserving his Passamaquoddy ancestors' language and songs and gives them new life in the 21st century.
The language is so important to our people.
Later this month, Toma will travel to Washington, D.C.'s Kennedy Center to represent the Passamaquoddy and the other Wabanaki nations at a major celebration of Indigenous culture and thought. The event marks the 25th anniversary of First Peoples Fund and the 50th anniversary of the Kennedy Center.
Oh my God, it's an absolutely honor to be able to come to Washington, D.C., to be able to share historical songs and stories of our people. It's an absolute honor.
The 3-day event features workshops, performances, film screenings, cooking demonstrations, and panel discussions led by Native artists, storytellers, and tribal elders that celebrate the arts, culture, and resilience of the continent's Aboriginal peoples. To some, it couldn't come at a more important juncture.
We've seen in the last several years a lot of decomposition of our social fabric.
And perhaps the expo can provide visibility to Indigenous values that could serve as a repair kit for that fabric.
This show is a collision between a kind of futurity that wants to see a better, more joyful and equitable space for us all, and the best elements of this country's past, pre-Columbus.
In Machias, Maine, Stuart Huntington, ICT.
And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Coming up, Mackenzie Allen Charmley is the newest member of the ICT team. She joins us to talk about her journey of journalism and her role as a newscast producer. We'll be right back. Indian Country Today is now ICT.
Most of our interviews are about programs or policies or things happening right now. This is not that. Today I'm talking to Ted Strong, and we're going to talk about an arc of history. It would be easy for us to talk about the last 40 years because we both watched it from a very great perspective. But really, let's talk about the last 10 or 20,000 years. Let's start with that. Ted Strong.
Thank you, and welcome to Native America. All the listeners and observers out there, when we began our trek on Earth, it was during what we people term as legendary times, when the Earth, the sun, the stars, the moon, the fish, the animals, birds, they spoke. They spoke about the secrets of life. They spoke about the powers that came from nature. That became our lifelong vision. During our ancestral times, going back to the first humans, they began to learn about the earth. They learned about life. That developed the tribal ceremonials, which in turn gave us a sense of organization, discipline, and purpose. We roll all of that into goals, objectives in our business lives today. And that is something that enriches corporations. It enriches bureaus and governments, whether it's federal, tribal, state, or otherwise. And it gives the purpose of doing business with honesty, with justice. So the beginning of time to this time, it's an immense amount of time. The geological clock has only spun a few times around, but we're already facing things like endangered species. We're facing issues like disenrollment because of lack of blood quantum, and hurtful things, diseases like alcohol, drug abuse, suicides. So it's turbulent times, and we have to rely upon the strength and beauty and power of our culture to help us maintain some sense of balance.
I understand that you mentioned that perspective. One of the persons who heard that was President Bill Clinton, and he called on you to then transmit that to him regularly.
Yes, in 1993, we had a forest summit in Portland, Oregon. Natives were given 3 minutes to speak, out of a full day, to talk about why salmon and forests were important. Everybody there spoke about policy, about monetary needs, but my ancestors and my bosses told me to talk about spiritual powers that were necessary for essentials of life. My 3 minutes of talk were about those things that are critical to make sure that we kept alive the cultural beauty. And the president said, "I've never heard that kind of speech before." And he asked me if I would join his council on sustainable development, which was balancing equity, environment, and economy. And he said, there's a secret, there's a mystery, a thread that binds those three. And we think Native America has some of the answers, some solutions for us. And I was asked, I participated for 6 years on that council.
I'm curious how you go about telling young people these stories and how to get them excited about using cultural values as a success tool.
You know, it takes an extraordinary amount of patience. It takes an extraordinary amount of storytelling. One has to be artful to interest them, because on the internet, on social media, they have thousands of interests that can lead them astray. It occupies their time. Before long, it occupies their mind, and it'll occupy their heart. You have to unravel some of that in order to get them to understand that there is this natural beauty as opposed to artificial intelligence. And it takes them wanting to develop that interest. That comes from practice of cultural religion. When they study religion from a native point of view, it's not like a building structure that is church. Church is something that emanates from the spirit of creation. Our stories of creation are fascinating. Our stories of creation are filled with wisdom. And they begin to understand that wisdom is different. It makes them stand out from all of the other peers that they may have. It gives them answers to substitutes for gang violence. It gives them a reason to live rather than think about committing suicide. It makes them understand that the proliferation of things like language, the preservation of natural foods, the preservation of the environment, all that comes from sustainability, these are things that we begin teaching earlier and earlier. So we start from kindergarten, and there the kids are anxious to learn. They're easily led. When they get older and older, they become resistant. So it takes that patience and perseverance, and we've been able to do some of that.
I like that, the idea of wisdom. Thank you so much for joining us today. Ted Strong.
Indian country today is now ICT. We are excited to share that Mackenzie Allen Charmley joins the ICT Newscast as a producer. She is a Dena'ina Athabascan and Black journalist from Anchorage, Alaska. Hi, Mackenzie. Welcome to the team again.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
So our viewers are meeting you for the very first time. Tell them a little bit more about yourself and where you grew up.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Anchorage, Alaska, from the tribal village of Eklutna, and that's just a small tribe, a few hundred people in interior Alaska. And growing up, I noticed that there were a lot of injustices within my own tribal community, and not a lot was being done to find solutions. And I was always curious, and that curiosity led me to journalism, and I went on to pursue that career and flew 3,000 miles away from home to come to school at Arizona State. So I have a degree in journalism and mass communication, a minor in business, and yeah, I'm excited to start my career and really start finding solutions for communities in need.
I should say congratulations to you because you just graduated from ASU, and we're all really excited and so proud that you have joined our team. I'm really curious. You've done a few fellowships and internships. One of them was with CNBC. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that was a great opportunity. It was through NAJA. I was a NAJA fellow, and it really broadened my horizons on, just the scope of what journalism can be, the reach you can have, the impact you can have. I wrote an article that was published on Native American college students and how they were affected by the pandemic. So it was really nice to get feedback from the community on the impact that reporting had, and it really just made me realize that I can make a difference. I can help find solutions. I can help spotlight voices that need to be spotlighted.
So often people ask me, they say, did you always know you wanted to be a journalist? And for me, it was not something that I knew from a young age. It really wasn't until college that I was like, wow, this is a super cool job. For you, how did you first know that journalism is something you wanted to pursue?
Yeah, I would say it's that natural curiosity that I had. I was always asking why aren't there solutions for these problems? Why aren't, my people, my communities, why aren't their voices being heard? So it was just that inherent curiosity of why. And that led me to where I am today.
You and I have spoke about this off camera a little bit, but we, of course, cover Indigenous people all across the globe. And you in particular have expressed interest in reporting on Alaska. So tell us what kinds of stories, you hope to work on.
Oh, goodness. There's a lot of tribal sovereignty that needs to be given back to a lot of the communities in Alaska. A lot of the tribes and villages aren't even accessible. There's not even roads to every community. So that provides issues when the census comes, which leads to inaccurate data, which leads to inaccurate funding. So there's so much in Alaska that needs to be reported on. I mean, there's over 200 out of the 574 federally recognized tribes that exist just in Alaska. So I think Alaska's just a place full of stories, opportunities, and finding solutions for those problems. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, one of the biggest stories, not just in Alaska, but everywhere, is on climate change. And so I imagine that'll be something that you also work on.
Most definitely. I can remember visiting a glacier down in Seward, and every year I would come, it would slowly, diminish, and it's just really sad to see that a lot of our natural resources not exist anymore.
Yeah, I want to talk to you very quickly about, what it feels like to be both a Native journalist, but also a Black journalist. I think that so often we talk about marginalized communities and talking about how journalists from both of those communities can really bring stories and tell stories in a right way. So maybe talk about that.
Yeah, so being both a Black and Indigenous journalist is a part of who I am. And, at first, growing up, I didn't want to accept parts of my identity as a mixed race Indigenous person. But I came to accept that part of myself. And it's really a superpower because I feel, and we talk about journalism in this day and age and how it's biased to be objective and use your identity in stories. But for me, I feel like being a part of these communities, being a part of the Black community, being a part of the Indigenous community is actually a superpower. I can supplement these stories, not be a detriment. I think my identity heightens my reporting and brings authenticity, which I think is needed in journalism. Authenticity, fairness, and transparency.
Absolutely. Well, Mackenzie, we're so excited to have you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Leah.
Indian Country Today is now ICT. Native people will soon see a new kind of representation in the U.S. when Lynn Malerba's signature is added to U.S. currency. Joining us is ICT regular contributor Holly Cook-McCoro to break this all down. Hi, Holly. Welcome back.
Hi, Aaliyah. Thank you for having me.
So my goodness, this feels like it came out of nowhere, but sort of try to characterize how big of a deal this is.
It really did come out of nowhere. The news broke early or middle of the night, I guess, on yesterday, Tuesday, and I really think it successfully caught all of Indian country off guard. And with the nomination, the President Biden's just another historic nomination for him of Lynn Malerba, the chief of the Mohegan tribe, as Treasurer of the United States. And she will have responsibility for the U.S. Mint, the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, if any of you have ever seen that very cool museum in Washington, D.C., Fort Knox, kind of the legendary Fort Knox. All of it, getting our head around all of this, I think has really been hard for Indian country to kind of process, right? That we will actually have, and I think this is the coolest thing, a Native American signature on our currency, and not just a Native American, but a Native American woman, continuing what I think is a bit of a renaissance year for Native American women in general.
Absolutely. I think when you talk about this being a learning opportunity, I mean, I can say for myself as well, I had to look up what is a U.S. treasurer? What does a U.S. treasurer do? And I think where we're at right now is there's a really big distinction between the Treasury Secretary and the U.S. treasurer. Maybe talk about that.
Yes. And even I had to look at the announcement twice. I thought, wow, are we getting a cabinet appointment, or is this the treasurer? And I actually think Chief Malerba is going to be able to do some wonderful things for Indian country from her perch as treasurer. She is a longtime member of what we call the TTAC, the Tribal Treasury Advisory Committee, which has been just really critical over the last several years, a decade or more, that in helping to get the Treasury in the right place in dealing with tribal governments, with individual Indians in tax policy. That experience is going to give her a solid foundation on the tribal side. I think her personal experience as a tribal leader in such a very successful and with different levels of economic development, such as Mohegan, have placed her in a very good spot to serve the United States as treasurer.
Absolutely. And we've actually been looking at her background. So what we know so far is that she was actually a nurse once upon a time. And now she, has built up an entire career and is a lifetime chief of the Mohegan tribe. What else do you know about her and her background?
And I want to say that as saying she's a nurse, she's also a Yale educated nurse, one of the finest nursing schools in the country. That it's no small feat to get a nursing degree from that institution, obviously. And she rose through the ranks in that capacity as well. I've known Chief Malerba in her role as a tribal leader at Mohegan over the years, and she has always led with such grace and thoughtfulness, wisdom, and I really. It's easy to visualize Chief Malerba in this position as treasurer, and I along with so many others are so excited for that. Her announcement. This announcement is a culmination of a lot of work, I think, behind the scenes. We had the TTAC work, but Treasury's role in the distribution of the CARES Act and the ARPA funds, it really did underscore some deficiencies within the department. We've had some terrific staff go over to Treasury in the last couple of years, Fatima Abbas from NCAI. And, when we look at all of this, we have a whole conversation about land, hashtag land back. I really like to think of this, and when we have a treasurer of the United States, as this could be the new hashtag money back.
Well, maybe you coined it here on the ICT Newscast, Holly. I want to get to Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's visit to Rosebud. Tell us about that.
Another historic. So it was her first visit to Indian country, and we could talk a long time about how important it is for these cabinet members to get to Indian country, to see what it's like on the ground. And a historic visit for a treasurer, a secretary of the treasurer to visit Indian country. So I think it was educational on that side. It was a beautiful day. I'm actually in South Dakota today. It was a beautiful day at Rosebud, and the announcement of Chief Malerba, along with the announcement of the establishment of the Office of Tribal and Native Affairs at the department, was well received, and a good discussion about the distribution of the ARPA funds as well.
We're running out of time here very quickly, but Holly, I would love our viewers to know what the next steps are, because of course this is an appointment, but what happens after this?
So this appointment is not subject to Senate confirmation. The list of nominees that are appointees who are subject to Senate confirmation was trimmed back pretty drastically under President Obama. So she will get a commission, which has yet to be completed, which is why the wording was the intent to appoint. So she will get her commission and assume office shortly after. We won't be in a holding pattern like we are with the IHS director in terms of having to wait for a Senate confirmation. She should be in place very shortly.
Well, Holly, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Aaliyah.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For more news, visit IndianCountryToday.com. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives. I am Aaliyah Chavez.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.